Welcome to Yoga Friends. I'm joined today by my friend Nick,
Hello.
who goes to the same studio as I do. This is my second time at his lovely house. He was nice enough to let me film over here. He invited me over for a party last year. Super cool guy, super friendly guy, charming, social. Not uncommon amongst yogis to be such a cool, nice person. But anyway, thanks so much, Nick, for doing this with
Oh,
me.
my pleasure. Thank you for asking.
So the first question I'm probably going to ask just about anyone is, how did you get into yoga?
Well, I really sought yoga out as a sort of a replacement or the next kind of thing I wanted to get into after being in martial arts for most of my life. I did various different martial arts over the course of my life, and my interest in martial arts was always the traditional Eastern martial arts, Japanese, Okinawa. Of course, all that came from China originally, and so there was always an element of the philosophical, the Zen underpinnings of all that stuff that I was very much into as well. And after I moved back here in 2010 from the UK, I was looking for a dojo, an Aikido dojo specifically, and I couldn't find anything that was sort of along the same kind of lines as what I was doing in the UK. And around this sort of time as well, I'd just been getting disillusioned with martial arts in general. There's a lot of stuff about it that over the years, you start to look really critically and skeptically at it, and you kind of think, well, maybe something a little different. My mindset's definitely changing as I'm getting a bit older. I'm a lot less, a lot more into, I should say, just a kind of peaceful existence, right, and that kind of thing. And so I was looking for something that embodied the same kind of discipline and a lot of the same kind of physical outlet as martial arts would give. So I was thinking about Tai Chi, and yoga had always been on my list, along with Tai Chi, of things to kind of explore once my body and my mind just sort of weren't able to keep up with the harder martial arts any longer. And so that's why I sought yoga out.
Yeah, okay. I know Bruce Lee. I've heard that a lot of the martial arts can be kind of rigid. And then you had a guy like Bruce Lee who was like, you kind of want to do what works best for you. You don't ever want to get locked into one certain thing. And I've always liked that philosophy. I think like MMA nowadays is kind of like that, where people will bring anything into it if it helps them kind of, well, if it helps them win or get better at fighting in general. Is jujitsu? That's a Brazilian thing, isn't it? That's not.
Well, no. So Jiu-jitsu is Japanese. It's
Okay.
kind of the original Japanese martial art, or it descends from the original samurai martial arts. And a while back, I think in the 90s, there was a couple of families, the Gracie family from Brazil, who studied Japanese jiu-jitsu, traditional jiu-jitsu. And jiu-jitsu in Japanese means the gentle way. That's how it translates. And they brought jiu-jitsu back to Brazil, and then they heavily, heavily changed and modified it to be more of a grappling, ground kind of fighting, competitive, and also just traditional martial arts style. But it doesn't really bear a lot of resemblance at all to the original jiu-jitsu, which is a traditional Japanese martial art.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting because yoga, the way we do it, doesn't really bear a whole lot of resemblance to what yoga originally was, which from what I know, from everything that I've read, yoga started out as basically just meditating. And it's interesting because I don't know why they didn't just call it meditating. The word yoga, I guess, means to yoke, but it's like, I'm not really sure what it means to yoke two things. People will say confidently, well, it's this and that, and the world and spirituality, or mind and body, or something like that. But I know that yoga is supposed to be, in my opinion, yoga is essentially, ultimately about inner peace. And sometimes if a person who's new to yoga hears that, they might get kind of bummed out, thinking, well, I'm here to like exercise and to become a better version of myself. To me, that's an attribute of inner peace, because when a person's in great shape, I think it's going to be easier to find that inner peace. I think that would be one aspect of it. I think kind of being strong within ourselves, mentally and physically, would help to go a long way towards that. But how young were you when you started out in martial arts?
Like, so I started dressing up like a ninja in the 80s, like every other kid, right? And going to we'd always have the one friend whose dad would take us to the martial arts supply store and buy us, throwing stars and all this stuff that we
Yeah.
shouldn't have had when we were that age. But and then Karate Kid, right? All those kind of things were a big influence as a child growing up in the early '80s. But I was 16 when I started like my first serious dojo, when I started training in the martial arts, and that was back in those days. It was a very it wasn't a commercial dojo, right? It was a local club style, and the style of karate that I started practicing was a very hard style, and it was very old school training, right? It was quite brutal, very, very disciplined, which I think was really good for me at that time. I got a lot out of that kind of being part of that disciplined environment that has really, really served me well as I kind of got a little older in life, and through work and relationships and all sorts of other things.
Yeah, one difference between me, I don't have, if I like something, I'll work really hard at it. I have to have kind of a passion for it. But some people are very driven on almost everything that they do. And I think for a lot of people, that starts at a very young age. If someone's set up in something where you need a lot of discipline, or you learn a lot of discipline, then that serves you well through your life. I didn't have that.
I'm the same as you, by the way.
Yeah.
So, and I agree with you 100%. And what kept me in martial arts, and going back week after week, even though it was just grueling and bruises and broken, all the rest of it, bones, and was the fact that I loved it. And I've always been the same as you. If I really am into something and I'm passionate about it, I will throw it in 100%. If I'm not, then I probably just won't bother doing it. And I think there's a lot of value to that philosophy of focusing your life and spending it doing the things that you enjoy and love doing. But the discipline in the martial arts, I think, is it's something that's given to you, but you don't mind it because you want to be in that environment. And then eventually that kind of turns into, you learn, you in yoga, you've seen the same thing when we're doing sort of holding postures for a long time, fire logs, those kind of things. There are times when you just want to stop because it's uncomfortable. And part of the yoke, if you like, the mental, spiritual, physical side of it, is finding that thing inside of you to keep going, even though it's not comfortable. And that kind of self-discipline, right, eventually comes if you just do it long enough.
It's a simple concept. If I do this, then I'll more than likely get this thing at the end of the road. But for a lot of people don't have faith, I guess, that that's going to happen. A lot of the people I grew up around, a lot of the people I grew up around had like envy. They would look at people. I grew up in kind of probably lower middle class, and they would look at people who had a lot of stuff or who made a lot of money, who were really successful, and they would say, "Oh, who did they screw over to get that?" Or their daddy gave it to them, or whatever. And I just always thought, God, that's not the way you want to look at it. You want to look at it as, if I work hard, maybe I can have that too.
Yeah.
But that's one of the main things that I think keeps people back. But there's also other things that keep people from believing that they can like live to their potential. And I think it's an interesting thing that I think about from time to time. I try to remove those blocks even to this day in my own life. Sometimes I think that they come, from early childhood, at a time before I even really remember. What would you say is your favorite type of yoga? You're going to try Bikram tonight?
I'm going to Bikram practice tonight. 26 and 2 is what we call it now, because there was some issues with Mr. Bikram Chowdhury. He was very much canceled, I think, for good reason. And yeah,
that's an interesting thing, because some of these guys in yoga get into trouble. I think over time you gain people's trust, and for some people it's just too tempting or something.
So it's funny. I talked a little bit about some disillusionment with martial arts, right? And I think it's the same kind of thing. There's in part of that kind of culture, there's almost kind of like a worship of the art itself, and then the senior, higher level people, you get in and you start to kind of elevate people, and they start to believe that that's true as well, and you eventually start to realize, well, you're just a human and you're fallible just like everybody else. And you see this in religious institutions a lot and various other things, right, where you're like, oh my God, he was doing this, or because they're just people, right? And in every, they're not superhuman. Nobody is. And so I think in yoga, same, right? You have someone like Mr. Chowdhury, and he was fallible and is still fallible because he's still alive and what have you. But at the same time, there's certain things that you can't just let them go, right? You have to.
Yeah. Every single class I teach, I ask beforehand, if you would like adjustments, let me know. If you don't, I won't touch you. I could tell as clear as day that there's people who don't want to be touched for whatever their personal reasons. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But it's interesting that some people over time just, they're, especially in yoga, which is so, you would think that yoga would weed out most egotistical people just because it's such a humbling practice. You're there on your mat by yourself. I mean, you're around all these other people, but you're stumbling and, never have perfect balance and stuff like that. It's a very humbling thing to get into. You would think that, you wouldn't have too many egotistical people, but I could see how someone, because, once you start teaching for a while, you get people who come up to you and are very grateful for what you do and asking you questions, and you have answers for things that they're looking for. And I think some people can let that get to their head. Going back to childhood though, I want to ask you about something because it's something that's near and dear to both of our hearts.
It's a very long time ago. So.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. But I think we're probably close to the same age.
I think we're actually just weeks or months apart,
Yeah, 70?
1970, yeah, okay. September.
Yeah, November, okay. Yeah, something happened in both of our youths that was really amazing. And it's hard to understand. So I want to talk about that a little bit. You and I both have a love for Star Wars, and you have a room that is under construction now, but one of these days, maybe I'll be able to get some video of that room and show people all the cool things you have. But we both have this love for Star Wars. To me, it's a real, it's in my soul. And I never personally got into Star Trek or Battlestar Galactica or any of that other stuff, but I love Star Wars with a passion. I don't know if it had anything to do with the merchandising or what. I mean, it was an awesome movie. But what do you love so much about Star Wars? Is that anything that you can put into words? Or
yeah, I could speak about it for ages. It's mainly the original three that I have a real passion for as well. I should say I'm not really been disappointed in everything that's sort of come after those over the years, but it played multiple different roles for me, right? It came out in 1977, and that was the same year that my family moved over here to the US. So it was my mum and my dad and me at 7 and my little sister who was 4. And that's quite even though the UK and the US are, probably as close a neighbors as you can kind of get, we speak the same language, all that. It's the same language, but it's not really, Mm-hmm. And I was saying to you earlier, the last thing you want when you're 7 years old is to be the odd one out, right? Mm-hmm. And so you come and I'm in school and suddenly I'm the odd one out and all this kind of stuff. So it was a difficult time, as I think it would be for any kid to sort of realize what's going on at that age. Now, Star Wars had come out, right? And so as soon as we got here, it was the first thing we did was go to the movies and see Star Wars. And, you can imagine at that point, how, something like that, you just totally immerse in it, right? Because it's kind of a total escapism, if you like. And so that was one of the reasons why I'd latched on. I had an awful lot of time on my hands back in those days as well. I mean, when you're 7, you do anyway. But, hadn't no friends really because all my friends were back at home, and so it was that period of time. And so back in those days we didn't have the internet obviously, or we didn't even have video recorders at that time. But what my parents did get me for Christmas was an album, The Story of Star Wars, which was just a guy narrating the whole movie with little audio clips of the movie sort of dropped in. So it was like an hour long thing. That was how he kind of watched the movie over and over again back in those days. And I just sit and listen to it over and over and over and over again. And, it was just that really is what started it all. But then, it's funny you mentioned Star Wars because I was watching something recently where they were talking about how so much of Star Wars was influenced by the Tao, right, and Taoism. Yeah. And the whole concept of the Force is really very analogous to what the Tao actually is. And so, it's probably no surprise that I'm also very interested in philosophy and various other things as I've gotten older because that was all there, right? When you're 7 and you're taking all this stuff in,
Yeah,
so.
Me too, Yeah, there's an excellent biography on George Lucas. I don't know if you've ever read it. I'm sure that there's probably a couple, but this one was, I don't know who wrote it. It was probably the most popular though. But it's interesting because it was, I think, his second movie. And they had they had put together a certain, I don't know if they got it like 75% done or whatever, and they had a screening for some directors, and they all thought it was awful, except for his good friend, Steven Spielberg, who was like in his 20s as well at the time. He's like, man, this is great, keep going. But George worked out a deal with them beforehand. He's like, well, why don't you not pay me as much money and just give me the merchandising?
Yeah.
And the merchandising, and I guess that must have been new back then.
Yeah.
That's what made him a billionaire.
Yeah, absolutely. Carrie Fisher said every time she looks in the mirror, she has to give George a couple of bucks.
Yeah. It's really, really incredible. And I think that's one of the things that kept it going for me as a kid was the merchandising. Like I loved the toys that much. And but yeah, it's funny. Sometimes I think about my childhood and in such a sentimental way, and I wish I remembered more. And so when I look at your Star Wars stuff, sometimes I wonder if that's, kind of your way of connecting.
It's 100%. That's the
time.
only reason that it's down there. And they are toys, but I call them collectibles because it's obviously more grown up to call them collectibles, but they're toys. And I don't, some of the collectors, all the stuff down there is like stuff that I either had as a kid and got thrown away or stuff that I really wanted as a kid but never got, right? And so it's like, right, now I can go back and buy all that stuff. And it's 100% nostalgia for me. There are people who collect all that, and they want to keep it in the box, and how much is that worth? And it's wasted on me. The first thing I want to do is take it out of the box and play with it, right? Even at 55, I want to, get my hands on it. And it's all to take me back to those years between sort of 7 and 12 when you just had, life was good back in those days, right? You didn't have any of the worries, concerns, responsibilities that you have.
Yeah, exactly. Like if I saw a video of myself, let's say we're at a party and everyone was like, hey, we're going to watch a video and you're in it, I'd be like petrified. But if they said you were 6 years old, I'd be like, whoa.
Yeah.
Even if I had mustard stains on my shirt and all this other stuff, I would think it would be so cool. But for some reason, once I turned maybe 12 years old or so, I started to become very self-conscious. And I would look at myself and say, and sometimes and this is really, it kind of sucks in a way because I would look at myself and be ashamed of certain things, that I wasn't when I was younger. And I shouldn't be,
I don't think you're alone in that, though. I think if people are being honest, almost everybody has that same.
Yeah.
Some people, I think, cover it up or react to it differently, and some people don't have that. But I think it's very common, though.
Yeah.
And you're right, you shouldn't, but that's the society that we live in. There's so much of that kind of thing around that there just shouldn't be,
Yeah.
But
so your passions in life, you like yoga and you seem to get into philosophy and you have a lovely wife and you also love music, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. And so I think guitar is like your main instrument. Yeah.
Yep.
Do you still have a band?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, there's a guy at the studio named Steve who he loves Star Wars and he plays. And so maybe one of these days.
Sounds like someone else I know.
Yeah. Maybe one of these days you guys will get together. But what kind of music do you play? Just
in the band, it's sort of mostly, funnily enough, stuff from my youth. So late 70s, all of the 80s, and then we stop about early to 90s, right? So mostly 80s plus or minus a couple of years, and it's more of the poppy side of things. A lot of synthesizers in there as well, because I do play guitar, but I'm also very much into electronic stuff as well. So. We have synths, we have samplers, vocoders, guitar, the whole kind of 9 yards. So
yeah, cool. I mean, I can tell you're passionate about it just by you showed me, kind of took a tour of your stuff, and it's pretty impressive. But okay, I think we'll wrap it up. Nick, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, not really. I mean, the only thing that you did make one point that I thought was interesting was you talked about the types of different yoga and those kind of things, and I think it's one of the things that I'm really into is traditional yoga, and that's why I sought it out. Right, I wanted something that gave me the same kind of thing as martial arts, and I will say that I've been a little bit. I've struggled to find that, and I still am struggling to find that, because what I found through Empower and various other things is most of the yoga that we practice here is only a small amount of what the traditional yoga really is all about, in terms of the philosophy and the spiritual, the yoke that you talked about, bringing everything together. here it's practiced more as a kind of a form of exercise, right?
Yeah.
And the other stuff is more cursory. So I'm still on that journey to try and find a good balance. And I've had an opportunity to practice at a couple of studios that are very traditional,
Yeah.
but they're almost like too much for me at this stage, right?
Yeah.
They're Mysore rooms where you get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and you
Yeah.
practice on your own, and I'm not quite ready to make that sort of commitment into it yet, but
Yeah.
I'm still looking for that sort of intermediate
Yeah.
kind of level, of traditional practice versus.
Yeah, it's interesting because I love kind of the rock and roll Johnny Cash style. I just find that to be totally satisfying. But you're going to have Aaron over, and Aaron's one of our teachers, and I'll bet you you guys will have a pretty good conversation about that if it comes up, because I think she gets so deep into Ashtanga. I mean, really, really deep. She's a pro.
Yeah.
At Ashtanga. I wouldn't call myself a pro at Vinyasa. I just have a passion for it, but she'd be a great person to kind of travel down that road with.
She's been very helpful. Erin actually gave me. She went out and bought me. In fact, like I thought it was one of her own books that she'd lent me, and I said, "Oh, do you want this back?" She said, "No, it's yours to keep." And I said, "Oh." And it turned out she actually went to the store and bought it for me.
Yeah.
Because she had a copy of her own, and she's a pretty great teacher.
I have one of her books too, an incredibly thoughtful person. But anyway, thanks so much, Nick, for doing
My
this
pleasure.
with me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I hope it helped. Good.
Thanks.
Thanks.